Should
Now it's there. Bit slow. UTS just a bit slow this morning.
indeed. Okay. So yeah, Michael, over to you to introduce the session to us. Thank you.
Thanks, Phil. It's my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Marie Nichols from Deakin University's School of Education. Marie's research involves the training of future teachers. The focus on primary school education, and today she'll be introducing us to Deakin's Nyaal. And the topic is the use of immersive technologies in initial teacher education. So over to you, Maria. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I might share my screen, so I'll get that up now. Hopefully you can see.
Coming up now. Yes.
Excellent. Trying to get it into presentation mode. There it is. So I'd like to begin by acknowledging that I'm coming to you from Wadawurrung country, where I'm located on our Warn Ponds campus here at Deakin University, and acknowledge elders past, present and emerging. And it's especially pertinent because I'm going to be talking to you today about our Nyaal, which is a Wadawurrung word, our 360-degree viewing space, our immersive technologies that we use with our pre-service teachers here at Deakin in our initial teacher Bachelor of Education primary courses. So to give you a bit of context, the example I'm going to give to you today is from our second year unit, which is on early years literacy. So we have a Bachelor of Education, has 4 units. It's a 4-year course. In our first year, we introduce our students, our pre-service teachers, to the content of early reading acquisition and early literacy acquisition. In our second year, we look at pedagogy, so how you go about teaching early years children. And then in our third year, it's upper primary. And then in fourth year, it's bringing it all together in sort of a capstone kind of unit. So I'll be focusing on that second year unit here. And so these 2 images are images of our Nyaal space. Recording in progress. The Nyaal is a Wadawurrung word that means to open your eyes. So on the left there, that's our 360-degree viewing space. So you'll see it's a bit like a donut. And it doesn't show you the ceiling or the floor. So it's a bit of a strip that goes around the room. So it's a circular room that we go in and view classroom practice, which I'll show you in a moment. We do have that video available also so that you can see the ceiling and the floor as well, and click and drag, or using VR headsets. And we give that video to our students that they can then go back and review the videos after the session. But for the purpose of the seminar, that's the extent of what they can see and what the videos were prepared to show. On the right there, you can see the room that's next door to the viewing space, and that we call that our think tank. And we all sit in there. Again, it's like a donut. We all sit there so that we can see each other equally and engage in conversation. So we unpack the theory, go next door into the viewing room and watch the video recording all together. No one's wearing VR headsets. We can all see things together, see where everyone's pointing, have conversations within that space. I've got an iPad in my hands there, so I can pause it at any time. I can rewind and point at things and move around the room. And we can have conversations in that space together as a group, which is a little different from that isolated experience of doing it with VR headsets where you're kind of on your own looking around. Then we go back into the think tank, unpack what we just saw. We do this, it was this particular example, it was a 2-hour seminar. So we did that with a reading example. And then we talked about the theory of writing, teaching writing, went in and saw a writing example, and then came back and had a conversation about that over that 2-hour period. And we were researching the experience. So we had some of our students engage in interviews with us afterwards and gave us their thoughts about the experience. And We also had an application that we were trialling with the School of IT there with our colleagues, and some gave us permission to have a look at their note-taking during the process as well, so that we could see how the process supported their unpacking of the concepts that we were trying to explore. So that's to give you a bit of an overview how we use the space. A little bit of the background about the tech. I was very used to using videos myself, like in the left-hand, furthermost left-hand image there, where you might have two cameras, one looking over the shoulder, one forward-facing, a lapel mic, and you put that into something like Final Cut Pro, and you have your B-roll and your A-roll, and you do your own cutting and your own blurring. But I couldn't do that with a 360-degree videos. I had to get a big team to help me with this, mainly because I didn't have the hardware and the software that would allow me to do it myself. And there were issues with that in that it introduced, I guess, a middleman in that I couldn't edit it myself. I had to get access to the videos. I had to do a bit of a running sheet of cut it at 2.1, play again at 2.3, and right through the whole thing, how to cut the videos up and how I wanted it edited, blur this and that kind of thing. But at the same time, it was good that I was now part of a team that was helping me to create these videos so that I wasn't doing it totally on my own, because it is quite time intensive to do these kinds of things. You can see there in that middle photo that the hardware that we use, it looks a little bit like a soccer ball to me up on a tripod in the middle of the room, but it's 360 degrees. So it meant that we couldn't be in the room like I could be with the one on the far left, monitoring the recording, monitoring the sound, making sure everything was working. You can see at the very far right there that our technicians were outside the room. They had to be hidden from view so they wouldn't inadvertently recorded in the video. And we can see also a really sophisticated setup with the sound system. I would not have known what to do there, with the mics on the different tables as well as the lapel mic on the teacher. The first time we did it, we only had the lapel mic on the teacher and following the conversation the teacher was having with the children. But feedback from our initial teacher students, when they first watched those videos, they were saying, oh, I wish I could hear what the children were saying at those other tables. So that's why in subsequent recordings, we had mics also on the tables so we could pick up the conversations that were happening at those other tables. That was a more sophisticated setup. And so I'm very thankful that I had our IT technicians there helping us with all that. So yes, took a lot of I guess it was quite intensive in that I couldn't just do it on my laptop. I couldn't do it on my computer with the requirements you need to do this kind of thing. So I was very lucky to have our technicians who were able to take that on board and help me with those recordings. So going back to the example I'm going to show you, that the purpose of this particular seminar was unpacking teacher practice. So we wanted to unpack, I guess, the standardized general approaches teachers use to model, to scaffold, to support student learning in the classroom. And we wanted our students to really zone in, focus in on the kinds of things the teacher was saying, what the teacher was doing, and the way they were interacting with the children, what they were expecting from the children in the classroom. They were the sorts of things we wanted them to be focusing on. And we wanted them to do that with an authentic classroom experience before they went out on placement and were expected to do this as part of an independent assessment where they would go through the similar kind of process. So that was the purpose of the seminar. So I'm not going to play this. Hopefully it doesn't start automatically. No, good. So what we start with in the think tank was we went over the theory of the different teaching approaches that teachers would use. So modeled teaching, shared, guided, all the different approaches teachers would use in reading and writing, before we then went in and observed the classroom practice. Oh no, we don't want to see that. And then this is going to be an example of what they then saw in that 360-degree viewing room. This is the version that they then could go back and look at independently. So you can scroll up and down all over the place and see the ceiling and the floor as well. But as I mentioned, there was only a strip in that 360-degree viewing room. So this is just, I won't play the whole thing, just give you a bit of an idea of what they could see.
So what are the features, Jeff, what are the features we're going to expect to see in this text?
About storms.
What are the features? Listen to the question. What makes a non-fiction text a non-fiction text and not a...
Because it's true.
It's true, it's got facts. So we just talked about some of the things we'll see. What will we see? We'll see... We will see about storms. Let's turn to the book and let's have a look. I think we've forgotten. We're going to see the text features are, we'll see a contents page. We will see an introduction. What else will we see? Glossary. Let's check. Is there a glossary and index? Let's check. Let's check. Turn to the glossary and index.
Questions. Index. It's not even into it. Glossary index.
I'm just going to pause it there. So I was scrolling there, but in the 360-degree room, there was no scrolling needed because you could just turn your head and look around and look in any direction you wanted to look. But this was the kind of thing that they could see during the reading lesson and then again during the writing lesson, where you could see what the teacher was doing, could hear the teacher. We had voiceovers embedded as well, where the teacher would explain their thinking periodically through the video as well. So it would pause, go grey, and have the teacher speaking. We also have captions such as, you know, this is when the orientation happened, this is when independent reading was expected, this is when whatever was happening was happening. So there were also things like that embedded in the videos. That's just an example of what they observed. So as I mentioned before, this was part of a project where we wanted to get feedback from our students to see the benefits and the challenges of being involved in this kind of simulated activity, a simulated observation before they actually have to go out and do it themselves while they're on placement. And this is the kind of feedback we got from the students, that they appreciated being able to see exactly what a teacher would do, and the fact that we were able to pause and talk about what the teacher was doing, breaking up the lesson as we were observing it as well. They found that quite beneficial. And this student actually said, then when I went on placement, that's actually what I saw on my placement. So it was great to know what to expect. And being our second year students, not all of them will have had the experience of seeing a reading lesson in early years by this stage of their course. So it was good for those students who weren't too sure what to expect to actually have had that opportunity to see it before they went on placement. They liked the ability to see what was happening everywhere. So normally, if you just have a point and shoot, the framing leaves quite a lot out. And the person who's doing the framing gets to choose what it is you're focusing on. Whereas here, the whole classroom was recorded and the students in the 360-degree room had the agency to turn around and have a look at whatever they wanted to be looking at while the video was playing. And they quite liked the agency they were given in being able to do that, to look around. Especially when we were focusing on, like in that example I just showed, that was an example of a small group reading lesson where the teacher has just 4 students. And normally you would just have the video focused in on the teacher and those 4 children. Whereas here you can actually then look around and see what the other children in the classroom are doing. How do you organize the rest of the classroom while you're focusing on that small group? And in another example that we showed them, the children at the tables each were doing different things as well, and they really appreciated being able to see what the other groups of children were doing. So they liked that. They also liked the fact that they were able to observe without the children knowing that they were there observing them. They felt like it was more authentic than what would happen if they were in an actual observation where they're standing around and the children might change their behaviours because there are a whole lot of adults standing in the room watching them. Though I can say that I edited out the times where the children looked at the camera and waved at it. So they were aware that there was a camera in there, but they soon forgot that it was there, and you could see that they just got on with what they were doing. Became a bit of the furniture, I guess. But that was the feeling from our students, that they liked the authentic nature, the feel of what they were observing. And they also liked the fact that they didn't feel the expectation or the pressure that they should go and help. If there was a child that they saw could benefit from some help, instead of just standing there and observing, oh, I should actually stop observing and go and help that child that needs my help. They didn't feel that they needed to do that. They could just completely focus on their observations. They liked that. They were able to turn and talk without interrupting the children's learning because it was a recording. So that was different to an authentic actual observation. So they liked that it was one step removed. In terms of critiques, this was following a different video. It wasn't that video there, but another video that we showed them where the lapel mic was only on the teacher. They said that they would have liked to have heard what the children at those other tables were saying, because they were doing different activities at the tables, and they would have liked to have heard the conversations that were happening at the other tables. They couldn't see the book that the children were reading. Even in this one, they couldn't see the book that the children were reading when they were reading aloud to the teacher, and they would have liked to have seen that. So we took that on board, and some said that they would have liked subtitles. Now, when we gave them access to the videos, the one that they can use in a VR setting, we've got the embedded captioning that does appear, so they can see it that way. But in the 360-degree room, the Nyaal, we don't have the subtitles in there. So taking this on board, we then did take on board their want to be able to see what the children were engaging with, what they were seeing. So this is just a quick example of how we took that feedback on board.
So when pre-service teaching,
oh, that's the voiceover. I'll just skip ahead.
You know, we talk about putting the reader in the moment. Has she put the reader in the moment? Has she painted a picture?
Yes.
I'm walking in the park, it's a cloudy day, and I'm sorry? I love.
So this video up, this image up here isn't hanging from the ceiling. We have embedded that in. So that's the piece of work that the child had written that they're all looking at down here on the table there. So if I press play, we'll see a different one come up soon.
Love that. When I'm listening to the birds, suddenly my phone dings. You can stop there and you can picture the whole thing. What I'd like to work with you is on what's called similes as well. Could you move your name so I can remember too, and you can remember too? And there is adding similes. Can you put that there, and then we can talk about it next week. I'm going to give you a mini lesson to help you practice that too. But please, perfectly painted a picture. I love that you're already thinking about it. Riley, not here. Jarvis, now you've been looking at handwriting and neat handwriting.
And so again, the piece of work that they were looking at appears up there. It was a lot clearer in the 360-degree room than it looks here on the video here. But again, this was designed especially for that room, and it's quite big on the wall in that room when we're looking at it live.
How do we...
Okay. So as I said, this is part of a research project that we're engaging with, as well as sort of unpacking how this can be used effectively in our courses. And these are just some of the issues that we've been sort of talking about in our group. One is the difference between just getting permission from parents and the teachers themselves to use those videos in our courses. We can just do that through a media use permission form. No need for it to undergo ethical review that way, which is a bit of an issue. I mean, I went through and edited out if, for example, underwear could be seen in the video, or children were picking their nose or doing something that I thought, oh, they might be a bit embarrassed if that gets shown. But then there were key moments where the teachers might have been saying something really critical that would be great for our students to hear. So you couldn't always cut everything out. So then you might go in and blur some things. So it's kind of up to the educator who's put the videos together to make sure that they've cut those things out. Whereas if it's part of research, then which is something that we're also wanting to pursue. We want to create these videos and conduct research on them as well, and then use that in our courses. Some of the feedback we've received back is, can you blur all the children's faces so that they're not identifiable? So there are some issues coming up in terms of the ethics of videoing children. Now, this was an example of just reading education, but what if you want to record something associated with classroom management, where children might be doing things that might be seen as naughty? Or what if you want a case study of a child who's working well below level? Is it ethical to show their image and for them to be identifiable in that kind of video? What if it's a child who has a disability? Will they want to be identified as having a disability? What if it's associated with trauma? So all of those sorts of things get us thinking about the ethics of videoing children. Even though we want our students to see authentic, real situations, real case studies in our courses. And in terms of blurring, yes, I've blurred. Blurring is possible. But then there's the ethics of making children faceless or voiceless, not including research or blurring them. Does that dehumanize young people? So we've kind of been thinking about that as well. So we played around with de-identifying through the use of the cartoon effect. So I'll show you an example of that. I couldn't embed that one, so I'm going to stop sharing and show you a different screen. So hopefully you can see.
It's coming up.
Excellent.
Why do people read?
Because sometimes I want to know some other things just than what they know, and they want to know what other people know, so they read books, and other people have written them, and they read because they can't read the person that has written the book, so they read the book.
Very good. How much do you like reading? A little bit? Not at all? Or a lot?
A little bit.
A little bit. How much do you like reading at school? Not at all? A little bit? Or a lot?
A lot.
I'll pause it there. But with the cartoon effect, rather than blurring, if we had blurred, we would have missed the look on her face, the expression on her face when I asked, how much do you enjoy reading at school? Now, from her expression, we can probably tell, and I can tell you, that she doesn't enjoy reading at school all that much, but she said she liked it. But you can tell from her body language, the pause, the way she looked away, that we can probably pick up on her cues that maybe she doesn't like reading at school that much. She's just saying what she thinks that you want to hear. You wouldn't be able to pick up on those little nuances if I had completely blurred her face. So I'll just go back again. I think that was the majority of what I wanted to share today, actually. I think the next page might just be questions. But they were the main sort of issues that we're playing with at the moment. So in terms of, do we video record our videos using 360-degree videos, but then use a cartoon filter, which will require heavy-duty rendering. Just that 1 minute video took about 2 hours to render and turn into a cartoon. So imagine 360-degree video, and if it's 10 minutes long, for example, how long that would take to render and the kind of equipment you'd need to be able to do that. But we're playing around with that, or whether we create unauthentic classrooms using AI. Is that what our students really want to see, or would they prefer to see authentic, real classrooms, and use those examples to unpack the theories that we've been exploring in our courses? So they're the sorts of things we've been playing around with and having lots of fun with in our initial teacher education courses.
Wow. There's quite a few questions. Marie, thank you so much. It looks fascinating.
Absolutely.
I don't know. Should I go first?
Where to start? Yes.
Yeah, where to start? I guess for me, one of the questions is, aside from the comments that you put up on screen, what else have your students said about the experience of doing this as part of their getting used to working in a classroom?
Well, they did appreciate being able to go in and see what to expect before they went on their placements. And the actual 360-degree video that was available online through our Panopto, rather than in that room, we also use that in our online course and in our Masters of Education. And we have students in that course who are international students who may not have even had their primary education in Australia. So for them, their memories of what primary education was using a completely different system. So they really appreciated being able to see what it looks like in an Australian context, in a contemporary Australian context, before they were then expected to go in and have a look and have placement.
So you're talking about international students who are about to do their practice in Australia?
Yes.
Wow. Well, I guess that was another question I had around. I appreciate the distortions of space because of the filming techniques, but I really liked the layout of the rooms. But one of the things that puzzled me was the male teacher who was working with the students at the bench and the female teacher with the students at a table. Did their voices interact with each other in real time? Because they seem to be very close together. Or is that just the effect of the film?
So is that interacting with the students?
No, with the two adult voices. I haven't worked yet, so I haven't worked, well, not for a long time, worked in a room where I've had another teacher working with me. I was just wondering, how did the students, like your students, respond to this idea of having two teachers in the room in slightly different spaces and working on
Yes. So I guess one thing is that there was a voiceover. So that was recorded after the fact,
right,
with the literacy leader of the school giving us a bit of an overview of, I guess, the philosophy and the key sort of learning areas and procedures and ways of thinking that the school follows. So they gave us a bit of an overview that I embedded over the top. But there were also two teachers in the room. One was a teacher's aide, who was there to support a child who has additional needs, though the person that they were working with wasn't necessarily the child that they were tagged with. They often just sort of move around depending on if the child needs to be working independently for a little bit of time before they go back to them. but in both examples, there was a teacher's aide in the room as well as the main teacher.
And did that help your students understand how, say, teachers' aides work in the room?
Yes, so it did bring up the question of who was that other adult in the room, and we had that conversation about not all teachers will have teachers' aides in the classroom. So how does that change their planning and the dynamics in their classroom as well? Yes.
Mm. And one final question, and then I'm interested. The complexity of the technology that you're using is really high, and
Yes.
you've clearly got the skills and the team to do it. Is it being replicated in other universities, or is Deakin the lead on this? You know, where else? Like, if we're interested in simulation, where else in Australia might we find similar projects to this, if anywhere?
I'm not too sure where else they're using it. It was the baby of our head of school. So Damien Blake, who's our head of school, he was the one who saw this kind of technology being used in international contexts to begin with. And so that's what encouraged him to think, oh, I wonder if we could use that here at Deakin as well. And he's the reason we have that here at Warm Ponds.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, I think the approach of having 360 videos, having the large screen, the circular screen, all that kind of stuff, I've seen before, and that technology is getting more common. But I haven't seen it applied in this particular way before. I think that's a really interesting. Obviously, as you pointed out, there's a whole bunch of issues that come from working in that context with the ethics and the privacy and all that sort of stuff. I mean, I found that angle of it as a technologist. It's not something. It is something that I think about a lot, but in different context to what you're talking about. And it's good to be reminded of all these kinds of issues that you need to deal with in your educational setting. I think that we're potentially, if you get the Gen AI working in this context, that's probably more leading. But again, it gets back to the question of technology and appropriate use of the advantages and disadvantages of just what you've got now to compare to the traditional setting, the effort it's taken you to do what you've done, and whether or not that represents quote unquote value for money. Do you get out of it for the students that you're teaching? Do they get out of it? Does it make your life or your role as an educator better? Do you feel like you achieve more with this technology? And then next question about, well, okay, if you add Gen AI, which has got some additional complexities to make it work, I wonder what your thoughts are on that sense, in terms of the value for money question, and then where you think.
Yeah, I guess in terms of before we use these particular videos, when we were unpacking the different approaches teachers use for the teaching of reading and writing in early years, a lot of the videos we were showing were US based or UK based. They had great videos. And so we were showing those, and our students were saying, well, yeah, that's interesting, but what do we do here in Victoria, in Australia, locally? What does it look like here? So that's why we were encouraged to get local videos from local schools that some of them then went into and went, oh, I recognize this school. I know those teachers. I actually saw you in the videos, and they could have those conversations and take them further. They really loved the fact that it was an authentic, real classroom. They didn't feel like it was something fake that they were. They felt like they were being stepped through, kind of like, the idea of, oh, that's theory. Theory is so separate from the real world. I want to see what's really happening. With these videos, they're seeing what's really happening locally, and it makes it real. The theory becomes real for them.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that even as a non-educator. I can see how that would work. I was a bit disappointed you stopped on the expression of similes, because I always used to get similes and metaphors confused.
I loved pausing every now and then and saying, You tell me first. What's a simile? Let's see who can remember.
Yes.
Or
Yeah.
compound
Yep.
word, compound sentences. What are they? These children know, and they're in grade 4. Do you know what a compound sentence is? Yeah.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
fascinated me.
absolutely.
That in grade 4 they're doing that, plus the difference between fiction and non-fiction and table of contents and things like that.
Yeah. And I like the answer that was given to the question about, well, you know, what do you get from reading? Why is it good to read? I thought that was a great answer, actually.
Yeah. So
Even though the body language said she didn't enjoy reading, that was a good answer about why.
Yeah. And it's funny, it's that disconnect between knowing something and being able to say it, but feeling actually different to it. So as you're pointing out, her body language said no, but her words said yes. So that would be really interesting for teachers to understand how that works, and having it on film then will then give them an opportunity to be able to make that connection much more quickly.
And then it opens the door to have the conversation about why. Why might that child not be enjoying reading at school when they seem like they're quite articulate and know quite a bit about reading? So they've got that background. Why do they not perhaps enjoy reading at school? What might be happening in the school context? What could potentially be changed or done to change her mind?
And that's important. And it's not just her mind, but the teacher's minds, the ones you're working with, to
what they can do.
Yeah, what can they do?
Yeah, giving them the tools and the techniques to think that through.
I've just asked
you mentioned.
Sorry. You
Sorry, you go first, Elizabeth.
No, I was just Abdus has nodded a couple of times as if he's agreeing, and I was just wondering if he had any questions.
Yep.
Right.
Can I ask one question?
Yes, please.
Yeah, actually, this looks very interesting. So my question is, currently we are delivering lecture in a normal way. So if we want to incorporate, what are the changes or modification that we need to do in our course content or assessment?
Oh, such a good question.
So I guess what spurred us creating this to begin with was that there was an assessment. We unpacked the theory in our seminars, watched a whole lot of videos, unpacked the theory, and then for an assessment, they were to go and observe a teacher engaging in small group reading, whole group writing, and analyze what they observed. And not all students really picked up on the nuances of the different teaching approaches that we were unpacking through the theory. And we thought we need to guide them through this process a little more. And these were our second year students who were still, some of them, not all of them, some of them were still developing the ability to paraphrase the literature they were engaging with as well. So it was two sides. It's how do you paraphrase the things that you're reading, guiding them through that process, but also how to engage in professional noticing to link the theory to what you're observing. So that's why this particular seminar was designed in the way it was. It also had a stepped process where it's inspired by Vygotsky. So it's stepping them through, tell me what your experiences of, for example, guided reading is, your everyday understandings of it. Write that down. Then read the textbook definition, go back, revise what you've written. How would you revise it? So they would do that. Then we'd go and observe in that 360-degree room, come back, have a conversation about what we saw as a whole group, and then they'd go back and revise again, always revising the same text. So we did that with reading, we did that with writing, just to help them understand how to paraphrase and not always just be directly quoting absolutely everything, or not even touching the text, just going off the top of their head. So bringing the two together and going through the process of what the key elements of an observation would be pertinent to the assignment, what to pick up on, not absolutely everything or things that aren't really that important to the grand scheme of things, but the actual example of a modelled teaching approach, or the actual example of a shared reading approach, or whatever it might be. We wanted to step them through that and guide them through it by simulating an actual observation and going through the process together before they had to go and do it for an assessment on their own.
Phil, I'm sorry I interrupted you. Did you have another question?
I did, but I'm not sure if that conversation is finished yet. I just wanted to check.
Okay. Abdus, did you want to ask some more?
No, that's okay. Yeah.
Because I just wanted to comment, what I'm hearing you talk about, Maria, is you were doing guided discussions. There was no lecturing in the old stand and deliver format. So you had a framework, but then you kept guiding the students through it. How did you get to the point of assessing that they were sort of picking up on what you really wanted them to? Did that come in the writing process at the end, or did they verbalize it?
We had an application that they were all using as well, and they could choose if they wanted to share the piece of text that they were currently working on, and we'd bring it up on the screen in the think tank, and we'd have a conversation about that whole group. So we would progressively return to the definitions that they were writing, the way they were describing the approaches, and unpacking it more and more together as a group.
Right. Okay. Very different to lecture.
You've had the teaching students go through, Maria. What about students from other streams like speech pathology or optometry? Other streams?
Yeah, Damien, who I mentioned earlier, our head of school, he has watched those videos with other groups, other schools at Deakin, and they've picked up on little other things, like whether it's the speech elements, whether it's the I guess the behavioural needs of some of the students. They've picked up on things that even we hadn't picked up on initially because our focus was on reading education. So yes, it does have other, I guess, uses. We could all come together and have our various perspectives and come together as a group. If it was a research project, that's why I'm so interested in turning these into research projects, because it has such potential.
And cross-disciplinary or interdisciplinary perspectives, particularly from what I'm hearing from Michael's question. Wow.
And that time as well, so you're doing second year students, you may not have had time to ask them to come back, 1 year out teaching, 3 years out from teaching, and see what they feel about the scenario. Yeah.
No, I brought them back after their placement. Well, I didn't, because it was a research project. Someone who didn't teach them had an interview with them, but I was able to read the de-identified transcripts of the interview. So, and that happened after their placement, after their assessment, after the whole unit had concluded. So it was interesting to see, because when we engaged with those videos, it was about halfway through the unit. So I think about 2 months went by before they came back for that follow-up interview. And it was interesting to see the fact that, what did they see in practice? How have they reflected on it? How have they reflected on it since that seminar?
And are you going to continue that? Will you be able to sort of see them again in, say, 6 months' time, or is it?
Well, I only teach in that unit for that course, so I don't get to see them again further down the track.
That'd be frustrating.
Yeah.
I think that feedback, it'd be really important to help drive doing this thing more, to get that feedback from students as they progress and go out into the actual workforce, and how much does it help compared to the previous approach? What are the advantages and disadvantages, and then to continue to refine what you're doing, because it's definitely got a lot of potential in so many ways. I think just thinking about it, you were talking before about how you work with your students, and just being able to sit there and pause and talk through stuff, point out stuff as you're going through the lesson. it's always that facilitation and debrief interaction is where the learning really happens, rather than just being in the moment itself as well. I think so. Just that part of it alone, I think it would be amazing for teaching and learning for your students.
Or for any profession that's going to require theoretical concepts in an academic environment being translated into practical applications in a workplace environment. In your case, it's a class.
Absolutely. Yeah.
In lots in management, in transport, in all sorts of other places, what you're doing, I think I'd be fascinated to see if Griffith could help you figure out how to, say, take it over to a management faculty and film people at work, and then have the trainee managers, the academics, the students, sort of look at, well, how would they manage, team projects or workplace environments? I sort of would love to see it expanded beyond the classroom.
And again, there would be those same issues, if you want a real authentic experience, do you want the people to be identifiable, the ethics of it? It's the exact same sort of questions you'd be asking yourself.
Exactly. Yeah. So is there any chance of you being able to do that as the research progresses, do you think?
I would be open to it. I know Damien would be.
Yeah. I mean, I could see some engineers going through that, Michael. What do you reckon?
Definitely. I think they might get stuck in there. No, I've been through, and it's quite amazing. And even you get different perspectives on people's backgrounds as well. So just beyond looking at some of the classroom stuff, some perspective of childhood and things they've been through, it's really quite a powerful environment. So yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. The question I was going to ask before was about VR. I think you mentioned virtual reality briefly in passing. It wasn't clear to me how much you've actually done with that 360 video using VR delivery.
Yes.
If you can maybe comment on that versus the other approach that you showed us.
Yes. So you would have seen the sophisticated sound technician's setup. What he did following our first video, which I didn't show, and we couldn't really hear what the children were saying at the other tables, in subsequent recordings, he had mics on the different tables. And what he did, and you can't quite capture it today, but if you had your VR goggles on, as you turn around, the person who's over here, their sound dims, and whoever you're facing, the sound becomes louder. So they become more in focus. So he created it in a way that when you're wearing goggles, wherever you're facing, that's the direction that the sound will become clearer.
Yep.
I don't know how he does it, but he did it.
Yep.
And did your students find that helpful in terms of?
Oh, they didn't comment on that. I'm hoping they did.
Yes.
Yeah, it's interesting the way the human auditory system works in that context. If you think about being in a party and the ability to concentrate on a particular conversation, and it's not always the conversation from the person who's standing in front of you either. You can actually tune out and listen to something in a completely different conversation. It's amazing how our brains can do that. Sometimes I wish it didn't. I wish I wasn't distracted by other people's conversations.
But I can see the benefit of it, because in the very first video that we did that didn't have the mics on all the different tables, there was a child who was getting up and moving away a little bit. And we were saying amongst ourselves when we were viewing that, I wish we could hear what he was saying at his table, why he was so disengaged with that activity. Was it that he wasn't getting it? Was it that he finished it quickly? Was it that he was distracted by what people were saying at other tables and drawn to them? why was he moving away from that table so much? We didn't know the why. And that would have been really interesting to be able to unpack.
But for the students, even
absolutely.
raising, like for your students, even raising that in conversation alerts them to the need to ask those questions when they're in real time. So
Yes.
if you didn't know, you didn't need to know his motivation because it's already gone, but his modeling of students who are going to do that's a great opportunity for your students, like for the trainee teachers, to understand when I see this happening, here are some questions I'll need to ask or some things I'll need to observe.
Yes, and as the teacher who was in the small group, she wouldn't have been able to hear what he was saying anyway. So as the teacher, how would you find out why that was happening? How would you follow that up? Is a great conversation starter.
Yeah. So even the incidentals help the trainee teachers learn. Have you got any questions for us?
No, I'm just interested in the ethical side of things. So the ethics of how you de-identify, maybe creating it, turning it into a cartoon so that it's less identifiable, but still an authentic classroom. Just how difficult that would be, because I found it very difficult in terms of how long it took to render just that 1 minute video that I created. I'm just thinking 360-degree video, is it worth it? Considering how much time and effort that would take.
I'm kind of drawn to Robert Persig's comment on the quality of stuckness at that moment, because I think the rendering would be far too time consuming. Blocking the faces out or turning them into pixels then de-authenticates it. So Persig would say, so okay, now that you know all the things that you can't do, what else is there to explore? How else might you do it? And I don't know the answer, but I agree with you. It is something sure other people must be exploring somewhere. But the whole issue for me about ethics around this is simulation has a whole different environment. It's not, you can't apply the same ethical statements to a simulated environment that you can to a real environment. But exactly what are the ones you apply to a simulated environment? That they're still being evolved. And I don't know the answers to that. I'm actually doing it.
There's no easy answer.
No, there is no easy answer. And I think sometimes it's about for each environment that you're about to go into, you have to redo the ethical statements or the ethical decisions all over again.
It's all about context, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's just purely and simply that the videos are locked down so that only certain people can see them, and those people then sign legally binding documents that say, yes, we won't talk about it. That's sort of another whole way to do it. And then you're free just to use it. But I do agree, it's a big issue. It's a big issue for everyone in simulation. And interestingly, I think you're sort of raising some of the technical end. I think there's the values and other things as well. So I'd be really interested to stay in touch with your research and find out how you're going. Are you planning to publish it soon, or where are you up to with it?
Yes, we're working on a couple of publications. One being about the note-taking support, how it helps with note-taking, but also the big picture of what inspired us to do it.
And did Michael talk you into coming to the Congress in August in Adelaide? No, Michael.
Not yet.
There's next week's job.
Next week.
Okay.
I'd strongly recommend it because you'll meet a lot of people who are dealing with the same issues as you, and we'll have different contexts, so different answers, but possibly
probably not so many primary school teachers there, but a lot of people working in simulation in a range of different contexts and using it for different kinds of things.
Yeah, so, exactly.
Yeah. Over to you, Michael.
On to Simon.
Yes. I think it was a fantastic presentation. So thank you very much, Maria.
Absolutely.
Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you. And you'll see it up on YouTube soon. And
Yeah.
we'll hope to see you at future SimCafes. Thanks, Abdus and Tanya and the rest for coming.
Yeah, thank you for
Good.
having
Yeah.
us.
Hopefully
Thanks,
see you
Mike.
both at the Congress as well.
Yes, yes, for sure. So,
All right.
Phil, you can stop recording.
You can stop recording. I've logged out of my account where I can control that.
Oh, I can stop recording. Oh, okay.
Yes,
Right.
you're a co-host.
Yes. Yes.